Hello, my name's Emily, I'm an artist and jewellery maker. Welcome back to my channel. As you've probably seen, I've been doing a lot of jewellery making at the minute and I really just wanted to get some paint out and have a good play with some art supplies. I've also had an idea about a series I'd like to start painting, so that is just what happened. The two were combined together and I had a jolly old time. Random fact about me is I absolutely love jars, always have. I even tattooed a lot of jars when I was a tattoo artist as well. They've always been a very key feature within my artwork, and I think that comes from the love of the preserving nature of it. And I don't just mean like the preserves as in jam. I also mean like the security of something, holding something precious within a jar and sealing it and everything like that. I think it's just a really lovely, aesthetic, visual concept. I just love them. And thus, I was inspired. And what normally happens when I'm inspired is I normally piggyback a lot of ideas. And I got very overwhelmed with all the ideas that I wrote them all down and thought, hang on a minute, this could be a really cool painting series and do something with that. So I'm going to start doing something along the lines of a famous painting, or maybe my favourite painting from an artist, and having that in a mason jar. So not only does it capture my love of jars, but also my love of painting and specifically artists' paintings that I feel very inspired by and who inspired me to experiment with different styles. And I think it'd be a lovely concept to have that in a portfolio for drawings and things. So I was really keen to start that, and I thought the first artist I wanted to do was Monet, because there's one painting specifically that I love of his and it just cropped up on my Pinterest board and I was like, I love that so much. I love how it looks. I love the composition, specifically the way that picture was. I don't know whether it was edited, but the colour palette was just exquisite. I'll insert a picture of that here so you know what I'm using as my reference. I will also link all of the products that I'm using as well into the description box with some links. These will be affiliate links, so they will earn a small commission with those, which I can then put back into supplies for my channel. It's a good way to support me in a way that isn't actually costing you anything, but it gives me a chance to give back to my channel, I suppose. So I'm applying some granulating watercolours. These ones are from Schminke. They're the super granulating variety, and a few of those mixed together to get a good base of texture, but also get the hues right where I want the composition to be, but a nice surface to then work onto that later with other materials. Mixed media definitely has my heart. I am very indecisive when it comes to materials. I like a bit of everything, so I think with that, mixed media is perfect for me because I'm really interested in the layering, seeing how things work and how things work on top of each other with different mediums and different finishes. Very much just someone who likes to experiment. Which also means I very rarely know what it's going to end up looking like. I have an idea in my head on what I would like it to look like, but very rarely does that actually happen because I always find a way of changing my mind or changing the finish, and I get very carried away. That's the hardest part for me, is knowing when to stop, which I'm getting better at. But progress still needs to be made. This is actually the third time I've attempted this painting because of that very reason of overcomplicating things and steering away from the idea too much because I like to play with different materials and get very carried away. Here I'm working in some Acrylic gouache. I'm using the Turner Acrylic gouache as the darker shades. I believe this is beryl green and pastel lavender kind of mixed together, and then a bit of white. And then I've just popped a bit of dandelion, also from Turner, and using predominantly those colours alone to get all of these greens. I want there to be a bit of cohesion in terms of the tone, but using them predominantly as the bases to all of the paints that I'm using. The tag was done in acrylic paint. This is the Winsor & Galeria, and I'm just going over that with some pencil crayon. This is Derwent Lightfast, and I wanted to do a tag with the signatures. That way, even if you don't know the artist, you can refer back to who it would be, and I'm partial to a penmanship, so it satisfied that as well. I then went in with my Caran Neocolor 2s. These have the most gorgeous buttery consistency, and I knew I wanted to layer a variation of greens and blues as the jar itself. I wanted it to be quite loose and scribbly because I think it gives that nod to Monet's style, but also I think I was just feeling very expressive in that sense, and I really enjoyed that sort of concept. I love textures, and especially these sort of textures, playing with them, the actual tactile experience of using them as well gives me so much joy. I like the whole process to be that as well, and very important in my creating. I want to be able to feel the relief of using art supplies as well as making something that I'm happy with. Because of my chronic pain, I often can't find a lot to help with the pain, so distraction is the biggest part for me. So not only does drawing and painting fill me with so much joy, it also has like therapeutic benefits for my pain as well. I then went in with a couple of Neocolor ones. These are not water soluble, they work predominantly as like a wax crayon, just to build in a base of texture but also get some depth and value within where I want other elements to be. It's like more like a guide, I suppose. My biggest inspiration of Monet's work is just how loose everything is, and yet nothing looks out of place. There feels like there's a lot of thought going into where those mark makings are made and things like that. I think it's very interesting to see how the perfectionist within an artist isn't normally seen, it's normally felt. So when we look at Monet's work, he might be looking at that and thinking, like we do as artists, oh, I don't like how I put that there, or that colour was misplaced, or something along those lines. But we look at these paintings, he's a master for a reason, and we look at each brushstroke thinking there must have been so much thought into that. He might have just thought, let's just give it a go. Like we do, we experiment with art supplies. So for me, that inspires me to put less pressure on myself of the finished piece. Also enjoy the process and the quality, which I have learned more since using art supplies, and painting is almost a relief for pain as well. And I think that's equally as important as how it looks at the end. I think so long as you've enjoyed the process as well, it's not time wasted. You can even learn something from something that you're not too fond of and try it again like I've done. This is the third attempt, like I said. When you look at Monet's work, you do not see his mistakes because we don't know what is a mistake. In our own artwork, we have a vision of what we want it to turn out to be. So we can see the mistakes because it's the things that don't match with that original idea. But just because it's not the same doesn't mean it's a mistake. It could be a on a whim decision that actually takes the painting or the drawing to the next level, but it all depends what you see and how you enjoy or perceive what you've done. If it's something that makes you happy, you're glad that that mark making was done in that way, you wouldn't see it as a mistake, you'd see it as like a happy accident. So why should a element that you're not too proud of equally be a mistake when it's just a lesson being learned? I love the subjective nature of art, and I think the pressures in education can often eliminate that from making art. I think there's so much pressure to have it look a certain way or do a certain thing when the process is as important as the finished result. I'm still layering with some pastels here. I've used some Neocolor 1s and some Neocolor 2s. I've also used a couple of darker coloured pencils as well, the Derwent Lightfasts, similar to what I used around the tag. I popped some of those in for a bit more texture and then also started working around the jar itself just to sharpen those edges. As much as I like the Neocolor 2s and their creaminess, I'm also partial to a sharp line, so I thought I'd add that as well. Also just to give a bit more of a definition around the outline, a bit of value, indication of where it ends, that sort of vibe. I didn't want the lid of the jar to compete with the rest of the painting, so started off with just a grey watercolour to see how I felt with how that looked. Again, learning from my mistakes of going too far, too soon. After that, I went back in with the gouache, and I believe this was still the Turner Beryl Green, Dandelion and White variety, and I went in with a little small brush just to give an impression of where the water lilies would be. I had bits of white here, bits of darker green there, and just kept mixing the different colours, tones and values, so I knew the basic layout of where I wanted the water lilies to be, but also where I wanted that texture of the reflection of the water to be, and have a bit more of that brush strokey element and then the pastel element. And I just really enjoyed the process of this. I didn't fully know where things were going to go and what I wanted to do. I wanted it to be my impression of this Monet painting, not exactly like a replica, and I just had a really lovely time doing it. I think I don't make enough time for this sort of element, like personal projects. A lot of the time I'm doing work for work's sake, and I think as well this is a massive learning thing. You do private projects and it can actually influence your other work as well. So I really enjoyed doing this, and I'm going to be doing more of this series for that very reason. I then used my Holbein gouaches. These were in pale pink and I believe deep yellow, and I used those as really watered down versions of where I want the water lily elements to be, and then worst case scenarios, if I wasn't too happy with them, they would wipe away. I then wanted the water to have a bit more of a reflective element, so also got some white within that as well. After that, I was pretty happy with where everything was, so I wanted to add a lot of the brighter tones before I then went in with the darker tones, because I think with that, I can go too light too quickly, so by doing it first it means that I know how much dark to put in afterwards. I have been known to overdo the highlights. I do love a highlight, so I want to make sure that I can then balance that out with the right value elsewhere so it doesn't look too complex within the points of interest. I also wanted to add a bit more of the fluffy paint strokes within the foliage as well within that painting, so I did that with the similar sort of colours to create cohesion so all the colours matched. Then with a mix of that pale pink from Holbein and red ochre from Turner, I started to work in some darker tones of the other hues within the painting. And then with that same colour, like I said, I do love me a bit of cohesion, so I did the bow that I wanted to have the tag attached to, a colour from the painting but still very different from the blues within the jar. The bow was originally going to be a baby pink, but then I really liked that sort of muted berry tone, and like I said, sometimes you just got to go with your instinct. Just because it didn't match my idea doesn't make it a mistake. I definitely think it worked out for the benefit of the painting. Also, the little nod to cottagecore, the aesthetic that will always have my heart, I was very pleased with this. After that, it was more sprucing up any texture that might have been lost within the painting parts, and the pastels definitely perform the best for that. Then the part of the painting that I was looking forward to encapsulating was his signature. I love how artists' signatures are a part of art themselves. I think it's something that we recognise by indicating who painted. You would see the signature that you would recognise, and Monet's was no different. I feel like it definitely has that brush stroke element, quite impressionistic, very similar to his paintings. And I did that in a black Polychromos pencil, mainly because I wanted it to have a bit more looseness than, say, a fine liner would give. I did also think about brush pen, but I thought it'd just be a bit too dark. If someone had to ask me what my favourite part of a jar would be, it would be specifically jars with a clasp. I love a clasp. I think that element is really satisfying to look at. I don't know why. The mechanism really intrigues me. It's metallic. I also think it's quite a cool concept, and that's the act of preserving is by sealing it. I don't know, I just think it looks really cool, so jars with a clasp get an extra point in my opinion. On par with that and another willing substitute is a frilly little jam jar cover. For a little bit more definition around the bow, I went in with one of my Molotow acrylic markers and then went in with a brush and some water, just to diffuse that pigment and the harshness, but also blend with what I've already done. And then it was highlight time. Did I mention I love a highlight? Well, I'm going to say it again. I love a highlight. I used my Turner white acrylic gouache because it has a little bit more of a watered down mixable opacity, which worked well for the highlights but wasn't too permanent too soon. I definitely didn't want to go too overboard with the Waterlilies. I wanted to kind of do the spots where they were in the painting. Then with whatever was left on my brush, I used as the guides from where I wanted a bit more texture of the brush strokes within the foliage. After that, it was then time to bring the jar element forward. I wanted the order within the first glance of this painting to be jar, Monet painting, and then anything else. I think it's important to have the vessel as the first part that you see because that's what's holding the painting and that frames the whole piece, I think. But then I wanted after that you would look longer at the painting so there's more detail. So the jar elements are a lot more simplistic, but then the elements within the painting are more expressive and detailed for that very reason. So elements of the white highlights weren't too stark, but also it had the jar glassy appearance. I then went in with my Holbein acrylic gouache in ice green just to give a bit more of those aqua vibes. And then the last little bit of dandelion left on my palette I used as some more water lily flourishes, but with more of a mid-tone value opposed to the bright white highlights. So the highlights within the painting were a little bit less further forward. I then added the Neocolor one over the top of certain bits just to bring the painting bit a bit more further back, which in turn brings those jar elements more further forward. Third time lucky, that is the finished painting. I am so thrilled with how this one turned out, and I feel like all those efforts that I did with the other ones were learnt, which made this one just feel so much better because I learnt along the way what I wanted to achieve, so I wasn't making the same mistakes again. It was a process, and I absolutely loved designing this. If you'd like to see another rendition of these artist jars, do let me know in the comments. I'd love to do another paint with me with one of these again because I just love the concept, and I will be making stuff out of this series. That's all I'm going to say. There's something exciting going to be in the works with this, and I will say no more, but just know there will be something featured within this that may be in the shop for you to grab. That's the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video or like me, please do subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you here and join me on all of my arty endeavours. All products that I mentioned will be linked in the description box, like I said, and then all my other links from my Instagram to my actual website that I've been working on and my Etsy shop, which I have been updating as and when I can with new products. They're all below as well, so check that out if you are interested. I'm so grateful for all the support on my social media as well as on my Etsy shop. But also thank you to everyone that has seen my stuff and Keep It Local and has been tagging me in pictures. It is making me very, very warm and fuzzy, and I'm very grateful. But I'm going to go. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you have a truly magical rest of your day. Please stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!